Welcome gamers to Carrier Command 2. My name is Das Tactic. Welcome to the channel. I hope you're going to enjoy this series. I'm actually looking forward to playing it. I've been playing this game a fair bit over the last week or so I started playing because I like the look of it, and then I just fell in love with it. It's a really, really cool game. So I'll try to explain in this video what it actually is, what the premise is. I think that superficially you may sort of think, oh, it's actually aircraft carriers. We're talking circa World War II or circa, the modern era. This is actually set in the near future, I guess, in one sense, where you're on a planet, and it may be Earth that has, had like the heat waves have sort of melted all the ice, and it's now just a group of islands that we're now sort of fighting over, or it could be another completely other planet. It's sort of like everything is. There's the actual aircraft and the various vehicles that you use are all drones. You're not actually flying the craft, so it's not a flight simulator, and it's not like a World War II style aircraft carrier simulator as well. It really is its own self-contained. It's like it's sort of like a mega battleship that sort of has all these different drones that it can sort of bring through with whatever it actually does need. It's got like the actual carrier itself has got like a lot of offensive capabilities and a lot of defensive capabilities, all part of the actual carrier experience. So we'll go through all of that as well in this particular series. There's a lot to cover. The game shines as multiplayer, as co-op multiplayer. It's a first person, so you're looking through a character as you play the game. It is real time, but it's not pausable real time, and it's not accelerated real time. So you can't speed up time, and you can't pause the time. Well, technically you can pause the time, but it's not active pausable. You can't actually pause, make decisions, then go on to something else. And it actually doesn't bother me, and that normally does. For me, that's usually an aspect of gaming that any game that sort of does that, where you can't actually do active pausable, I tend to avoid. But in this game, I really am taken by it. I'm not finding it overwhelming. I've just got to be careful, it sort of suits me, this sort of style of game, to be honest, and maybe it'll suit you as well. So I hope I do a good enough job to actually explain what's going on with the actual game itself. So I hope that's a really, really rough summary as to what does go on. But as I say, the game absolutely shines as a cooperative multiplayer where essentially you're in command of the bridge of this particular carrier ship, and you can go outside the bridge, you can do all sorts of other things, but really your decision making is all done on the bridge. And there's different stations on the bridge, and so if you're playing multiplayer, you can have different friends or different people actually on these different stations, and you're all working together to try to fulfill little missions. And quite often those missions will either be invading these independent islands that have got protection, or going after the enemy carrier. Now, I much prefer playing with the islands, and I don't really like the way that the AI sort of is using its carrier, because it seems to have a lot more advantages than I have, even on the easiest mode. And so you tend to be sort of always feeling a little bit rushed. So in this episode, I'm also going to show how to play the game with the AI carrier turned off. So it doesn't do it natively in the game. I wish it would. I've got a few things in the game that I would really hope get added to the game. One of them is actually just what version we're playing. It doesn't appear anywhere on the screen. There's just nowhere that I can see anyway where it actually does highlight the version of the game. And it's really important that you know which version the videos actually are. And this is version 1.3.1. And you're thinking, okay, well, why does that matter? Well, this is one of these games where every major iteration, like 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, each major update with the game has actually brought some pretty sweeping changes. And so if you've been watching videos from when the game came out last year in 2021, actually I should point out, because there is no number, I'm recording this in early June of 2022. And so if it goes up to version 1.4 or 1.5, quite reliably, I would think that some of the things that I talk about will no longer be a problem not a problem, but will no longer be part of the actual game itself. For example, I think it was 1.2 brought in a whole sweeping lot of user interface changes that were based on mods that people really liked, and so they sort of incorporated those ideas into the game, which I love it when developers do that. Quite often developers won't go anywhere near where modders go, and but I do like it when they sort of think, oh, okay, that's really a popular move. let's go and pop that in the game. And it's great. It makes the game easier to understand. It sort of presents you with more information. And so they're the sorts of things in the game that each iteration really is quite different than the iteration before. Not dramatically, like it's still the theme of it's still the same, but it's but the major ones, we're 3 major iterations now into the actual game itself. The game originally came out in 1988, and it was published way back then by Microprose, which you can see down the bottom here. And you can even, one thing I love about this game, it pays homage to that 1988 game. The underlying graphics are very much like that sort of era. You can see there the pixelization of the logos, the fonts. They're all like this all the way through the game. They don't get in the way, and this is actually a really surprisingly good balance of what they've actually been able to do in the game. They've actually been able to pay homage to that era that it's from, but still have incredible graphics in the actual game itself, and incredible systems in the game. It's a really surprisingly good game. I actually love the graphic style, and I don't know, would anyone really not like it? I don't know. Maybe there are. I'm guessing that if I'm gushing over it, there'll be other people that actually will probably be thinking, oh no, I prefer it to look more realistic. But I actually really think it's so functional the way it's sort of been done, and it does pay homage to that earlier era, but not in a way that hinders this game. So anyway, Microprose is back, guys. They're back. So Microprose had some incredible games back in the day, and then they had a bit of a hiatus where they weren't really around for decades, really, and now they're back again with some incredible games, and this is one of them. This is one of their great games. Geometa is the developer of the game itself. Just press escape, and we just go back out again. If you're playing multiplayer, you can set up like a profile. I'm not going to be playing multiplayer with this one, so that's the one time that you do get to see your profile. I would love a third-person mode, like a third-person camera view, so you can follow people around and particularly follow your vehicles around. That would be just so cool. But it doesn't actually have it in the game. Not that I can find it anyway. I have looked fairly extensively, but there doesn't seem to be a way to do that. It's funny because the game is geared to that. Like, it's really quite a strange system where that's sort of the case. It's as I say, it's a very cool game. The way it's sort of everything does work, but there's just these little things like that you think, I wonder why that's not in there. It would really add to the immersion of the actual game. Because even the vehicles, even though you don't have to pilot them, you can actually still go into the camera mode of the vehicles and see the perspective of the battle from what they're actually then going off and doing. Anyway, you've got a profile, very easy to set up, and that's what your character then looks like on the bridge. So if you've got multiple people in the bridge, then they will all look like whatever profiles they've set up for their characters. We'll come back to the game. The options are fairly extensive. It's the stock standard stuff, but there is a little bit extra in there. I won't bother opening it. And you have a number of different languages in there, 8 different languages, which is great. So let's get into the game. Now I'm going to tell you in this episode how to set up a game so that you can actually play it against the environment. So this is a player versus the environment setup. So we'll just get in. And so you've got single player and multiplayer. Now, as I say, the multiplayer is where the game does shine. I'll just show you the single player, and then we'll go across and set up an actual PVE game. So, new game. And you do have a campaign that you can then sort of go and follow through. What this one does is it sort of presents a bit of a story. You start off in space, in like a capsule. You come down, you're put in charge of the carrier, and then you're off trying to sort of take over these different islands and stop the enemy, the AI from taking over the rest of the islands. Now, the AI does seem to be able to much more easily take the islands than what you can. I don't think I've seen any playthroughs anywhere where the AI actually does worse than the human in that sense. But it's actually easy-ish to kill the AI carrier, and the game can still continue on. So my preference would be to be able to turn that off. If I just go into custom mode, I would love to actually have AI teams for that to be active, so I can actually get that down to 0. Can't do it. So the AI teams can go up to 4. You can have up to 4 enemy AIs, but from my perspective, I wish it was from between 0 and 4 and not 1 and 4. So that would be something I would absolutely love. Now, by default, this should be just on 1 shield, which is the difficulty of some of the independent islands. They will range between 1 and 4. Now, what actually happens here, the more that they actually have with their protection, the more the more with the shields, the more protection they actually have, and the harder it is to invade those particular islands. And even if you play on one shield, it'll just mean that you've got maybe 2, 3, or 4 islands at the start that are just easy to take over. So I'm going to be playing my game on 2, but I'll just leave it on 1 just to sort of show what does go on. You can have between 4 and 64 islands to actually then fight over in the middle of the map. The more islands you have, in one sense, probably the easier it is to a degree, and the more fun it is. Like, you can do a lot more. If there's not very many, it's going to be a short game, I guess, in one sense, but also it's going to be a little bit boring. I think that 64 is great. Like, it really does feel good, like as you're sort of playing the game itself. There is a tutorial in single player, and I would strongly suggest that you have that turned on. It's not that you don't play the tutorial, it actually just guides you of what to do in the game for the first part of the game, just for your first island. But you can only do that if you've got pretty much most things set to default. This bottom lot of things, for example. So I don't know if I can still keep it even if I get my own starting islands. Now, the islands supply you, so they're your supply areas, and so you can actually have like multiple islands if you do want to have at the start, and the tutorial will still work with those, so that's okay if you wanted to. I'll just keep it on 1 for now. But as soon as you start to change the loadouts or the blueprints, it becomes unavailable. Now, this is one of the problems with the game, is the blueprints. It may be working as designed, but I can't see a good reason for having it. So what it is that let's just talk about the loadout. The loadout is for your carrier, and it also gives you different vehicles, whether they be aircraft or infantry type fighting vehicles, like fighting vehicles for the actual islands themselves. You've got different loadouts where you've got different equipment, and so default will give you enough to get a few islands under your belt before you then need to be relying on those islands to then supply you with the rest of your loadout, your rest of your kit for the rest of the game. And so that really the game is all about getting these islands, getting the logistics from these islands, and then building up. So I love that aspect of the game. That's why I just want to be playing against islands and not worrying about these carriers. But as soon as you move across, now default gives you a little bit at the start, enough to, as I say, to take over a handful of islands. If you go to the next one in through here, the next one is minimal. This gives you practically nothing, and I love this actually. I really like this one here because you have to be so careful and choose the island that you attack just so spot on to be able to then get the resources that you need, because you can only really probably take on 1 or maybe 2 islands before you absolutely must be getting resources from those 2 islands. So you've got very limited prospects with that particular start, with that one there. By the way, the islands are all procedurally generated, and they're also randomly placed, so you don't know what resource is going to be where on the map, and what degree of difficulty each island will actually then go and be, which is again quite interesting. Every game is very different. Anyway, I do like the idea of this one. I love playing that. It's a long game because you've got to be super careful. You cannot afford to lose anything at all. Okay, the next one across is the complete loadout, where you've just completely full. You've got everything that you could possibly want. So anyway, as soon as you move away from the default, and we'll be playing on default when we do it. So that's what goes on through there. Now, the blueprints, there are certain craft that you don't have access to or that you can't build, and so you can't sort of get more. For example, there's a heavy vehicle, like a heavy tank type unit called the Bear, and the Bear would be a locked unit. There's also there's three infantry fighting vehicles essentially. You've got like a scout car, which is more of which is called a Seal. You've got an all-round sort of vehicle, which is called a Walrus, and then you've got like a heavy vehicle called the Bear. And quite often the Walrus and the Bear will be locked in with their blueprints, and you have to find their blueprints on the maps to then go and access those particular designs before you can start building those. But they're super strong once you actually do get them. So that's an example of what a blueprint actually is. If you play on default, you've got like essentially a starter kit, like what I just described. You've got the Seal, the Scout vehicles. You've got them available to build, but not the other 2. If you go to the next one, you've got none, which means that you don't have any and you have to find all of them on the islands. And I love the idea of this as well. So this is a way that I do want to play the game, but this is buggy, and I'll just talk about that in just a minute. Then we go to all, where basically all the blueprints are unlocked, completely unlocked, and you don't have to, like, as soon as you get to an island that can sort of create these things, you're done and dusted. You just build them as long as you can afford them. When you click on none, the trouble with this one is you can still see what blueprints should be available on islands when you're actually in the game. But when you go and take that island, nothing, you don't get anything. You stay on none for the whole game. And the only reason I can sort of even think that might be what the developers are thinking of doing with that is if you set this on complete. So if the loadout was on complete, so you had like a lot of stocks at the start, but you knew that you were going to run out, and then you just had the unlock blueprints at the back there on none. That's the only way I can think of that would be working as designed. Otherwise, I just can't see it being a thing. Like for me, I would love to be able to play on minimal none, and then be able to unlock the blueprints as I go, making each island just super important. So that's why I'm going to be playing on default. So that does then enable the tutorial. Now the trouble is, as I said before, I would love this to be able to be made into a 0, but it's not. So it is set to 1, and so I'm just going to escape back out of there, and we'll just go and escape back again into this area to be able to play against the against no AI, so that you actually have got the game open to yourself. You need to start up a multiplayer game, and so you go and host the game, make it just so that the maximum players. This is just for a solo game, as I say, a PVE solo game, one player. Just password protect whatever you're doing, that doesn't really matter. And we're just going to go to new game, and we're just going to go to custom. Alright, so here we are. We've got the 64 islands. Again, we can sort of change that to whatever we actually want. We've got human teams, AI teams, and I can have this up to like 4 maximum on both of these if I wanted to. But I don't want that, of course. And you can also, you have to have at least one human team, because that's the team that you're going to be on, and the AI team. Now the AI team can actually go down to 0. Now I've tried experimenting to see if I have my team and then an AI team on 0. It doesn't work. What it does is it says, oh, hang on, we're missing an enemy aircraft carrier. We need to put one in. And so what it will then do is go and change that 0 to a 1 in the game, and then you're still going up against an enemy aircraft carrier. So it's not what we want. So the way around this is you still keep this on 0. God, I wish this was just part of the solo game. It would make this so much easier. All you do is you just keep that on 0 so that the AI won't spawn, and you just add in another human team. That gives the game the second aircraft carrier, but no one's playing in that second team. So it just sits back at its home port and does absolutely nothing, which then means that you can then go and play through the various islands. But I wish that was a part of the game. It's sort of one of these things where I find the challenge of going after these islands so much more fun than the challenge of the aircraft carrier personally. That's just a personal preference. So I'm going to go, for this game, I'm going to be going 2 human teams, no AI teams. Starting islands, I'll just have 1. Now, the more starting islands that you have, the more factories you essentially start with. But when you only have 1, you just have a warehouse and no real production from there. So you do have to go and get your production from the other islands. I'm going to ramp the base difficulty up. And I would suggest that you don't do this if you're a beginning player. But I'm doing this so that we can actually then talk about the sorts of challenges you're likely to sort of face in the game, and that way we can sort of deal with a few different things in this series. I'll probably just take over maybe 1, maybe 2 islands, just so you get a bit of a feel for how the game actually does work. And as I said before, loadout and unlocked blueprints will then be set to default, so that way it will work the way it's supposed to. We're not going to have a lot that we can then go and do, but we will be able to sort of move our way through. And the reason I'm going with default loadout and not minimal loadout, even though I prefer to be playing that, is it will take me way too long to go through the attacks that I need to do if I don't do this. So default just gives me the freedom and flexibility to be able to move the pace along a little bit with the game. By the way, the game is a fairly sedate game. There is no rushing with, you know, you can't sort of double or quadruple the time as you sort of move through the game. It is the timing is the timing. I mean, your ship does move very, very fast because we are talking about, with, you know, when we're in the sci-fi future, but it's still, you know, it just goes at its own pace, and it's nice. It's actually really quite nice that it does it. You don't really notice it much. I mean, I think I will because I'm recording it, but when I'm playing it, I'm just into the game. So anyway, let's get started, and the game will then load. And here we are on our carrier. So I'll probably leave this episode pretty much here. Actually, what I might just do is I might just launch the carrier, just so that you can at least sort of see it in action. Actually, no, I won't. I'll do the next episode from here, I think. What we might have a quick look is just look and see where we actually are. So we're on this carrier. This is our start island back over here. So this is that one island that we had sort of started with, and this has got a warehouse on it. We're actually on a slipway. With a loading, like on the loading dock, like a they've built the carrier, and it's ready to now be sort of launched off. So this is the actual carrier deck, and we're now on the slipway, ready to be launched. So we'll do that in the next episode. So I will leave this episode here, so it's not too long, and in the next one we'll then talk about the actual bridge itself, and this is where all of the action takes place. Actually, what I might do is I might do a quick tour of the ship. That way, at least you can sort of see what's going on. If I go through this central door, so we'll spend a little bit of time with this one here. We've got other doors that we can open up that sort of go into other corridors that sort of take us back out again on the conning tower. But let's go down into the lower decks. If you go to deck 4, this will then take you to the flight deck. So we're just in the aircraft, sorry, we're in the lift of the elevator. And this is the flight deck, back out through here. So that's where the aircraft take off from, or some of them take off from there. Well, actually, that's where all the aircraft take off from. And if we now just go down to deck number 1, this is down on in the storage areas down below. Alright, so we now move across, and we're now under the deck, and we're now looking at the various craft that we have here. Now we've got 4 craft that we start with. We've got some 2 helicopters called Razorfish, I think. I can't remember exactly what they're called. And then we've got sort of like 2 AWACS style spy plane type things, which are called albatrosses. Now this, you can see the loadouts there. They've got like they've got missiles in through here. These are infrared, like heat-seeking type missiles, I think. And we've also got chain guns, which are a bit pointless on these guys. The chain gun is something that is used for dogfighting, but these are really spy planes. And that's sort of like the camera at the front there. These also then have different sorts of missiles on board. We probably changed the loadouts for these. They've got the same missiles on there. Nothing much else though with these little guys. Now down below is where we've got the next lot of craft. So this is the bottom deck. We actually sort of see in through this side. I'll just go down to the next deck down, and we'll have a bit of a look down in here. So this one here, we've got to run all the way down through here to be able to then have a look at these next guys as well. And then we have to go all the way across this landing, and then these are where the fighting vehicles are. And we've only got scout vehicles at this part of the game. By the way, this is all the supplies that we actually have. So we've got supplies in here as well. And so these supplies do run out. We have to be careful of those. If we have a look at these different craft. So we've got, these are our basic scout drone fighting vehicles that we sort of see in through here. These are fairly simple. These have just got like a similar sort of chain gun at the front there, like a 30mm cannon. So we've got those have both got those. And then over this other side, we've got one that's a bit different. There's another one that's the same over this way. So we've only got 4 of these as well at this part of the game. We can get up to 8 of each of the flight vehicles, and also these actual land vehicles as well. These have got a special canister on top, and the canister is one that allows us to then take over the islands. This is like a virus that we can actually sort of corrupt and take over the actual locations on different islands, and that's how we get our other resources. They become the factories. All right, so that's a bit of a rundown of the actual ship itself. By the way, that is the access back out into, and in this case we're still on the dry dock, so that's going to be the slipway at the back there. In fact, if I just go to the back and through here, this is literally just going to be, the ship ends right here, and then we've got the actual slipway. This is the rest of this is part of the dry dock. In fact, you can see through there the little gap, and that's then the dry dock out through that side there, and back to the island. Not that we don't actually ever really sort of make use point of that one, but this is how the vehicles get off the carrier. Well, guys, I'm going to leave it there. That's a bit of a tour of the carrier, and a way to actually set the game up so you're just playing against the environment. And in the next episode, we're going to be looking at the bridge and sort of just a bit of an overview of the different areas on the bridge. We won't go into any great depth in any one of them, but what we will do on the bridge is we'll figure out what our first target will be, and so we'll then sort of get things ready to go and assault that one there. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next episode.